Hey everyone, Admiral Seabass here for the last video in my strategy series. This is going to be covering the United States and the China KMT. So let's start as before with an overview of the US and the KMT victory objectives. This is also going to be a fairly short one too, because here's the thing about the US in this game. Just like the historical situation, the US was very neutral at the start of World War II. A lot of the U.S. citizens and politicians did not want to get involved in World War II. Many had thought that U.S. involvement in World War I had been a mistake. And rightly or wrongly, many saw World War II in a similar vein. I don't happen to agree with that. I have the benefit of hindsight, though. So the U.S. was very cautious about getting into World War II, and as most of you know, did not until they were attacked at Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. So, the U.S. income starts very, very low, and the U.S. does not go to war until they reach their wartime income level of $63, which you can see right there, and they start at $6. So, I've seen the U.S. not enter the war in this game until 1943 or 1944. The Axis want to keep the U.S. out of this game. They can do that by not triggering U.S. income increases as quickly as otherwise could happen. So keep that in mind as the U.S. player in this game, that the Axis can keep you out. So you need to stay flexible. And I would argue that the U.S. I see you can't see that very well. The U.S. I think should try as much as possible to lend-lease in this game before they're at war. The U.S. can just spend whatever money they have to slowly build their forces, or they can lend-lease under certain circumstances and get units into the war quickly. And so I think these victory objectives matter less for the U.S. than what they can do with lend-lease. And what the U.S. can do with lend-lease is mentioned here. And I'm trying to get this so you can see it. Can the USA lend-lease to China KMT? Yes, once KMT is at war with a major power. What that means is once Japan invades China, the US can lend-lease to China KMT. And I think they should do that. Can they lend-lease to Britain, France? Yes, once the US gets to 15 IPPs. And can they lend-lease to USSR? Yes, once the USSR is at war with the Axis. To me, the major strategy I'm going to try in this game is lend-lease, max lend-lease with the United States to get those units into the war as quickly as possible. So what's the U.S. looking to do by the end of the game? Well, those are listed here. Monroe Doctrine basically means you get a victory point if there's no Axis or Comintern units in the Western Hemisphere. There's only one way that the Axis really can do that, and that's by aligning Argentina. Contain fascism. Score one victory objective if at the end of the game Germany and Italy are within their borders at the start of the scenario. I think that's similar to the Commonwealth and France. That's a pretty difficult one to get. Contain communism. Score one victory if worldwide there are less than 3 new nations or former colonies possessed by the Comintern. Well, what can the U.S. do about that? The U.S. can't go to war with the USSR until Berlin has fallen. So don't count on that one long term. Pacific security. Score one victory if the U.S. ends the game with twice as many capital ships in the Pacific as Japan. That's possible. This one's a little gamey, though. I mean, you can literally move. I've seen somebody move a ship from the Atlantic into the Pacific and get this at the end of the game. It's representative of naval power in the Pacific between the U.S. and Japan. So watch it. You know, you're going to be building capital ships. You're going to start with some capital ships. So watch it. Maintain the empire. Score one victory objective if the U.S. ends game in possession of all of its original territories. That's kind of going to come down to Philippines right there. So watch that. And maybe some of the Pacific Islands as well. And then last but not least, technological superiority. And remember, I have a house rule on this. The U.S. gets one victory if the U.S. has any 4 technologies. You know what? That one's probably the most important because you can do that. Just dedicate $2 a turn until 1939 and then $8 a turn after that until you get 4 and get the 4 that you want that you will use. So to me, that's the most important one because it's the easiest for you to achieve. All this depends on is spending the money and making a die roll. Okay? I don't think I've ever seen anyone not get this as the US in this game. So this is priority number 1. Priority number 2 is probably Monroe Doctrine because it's so easy to get. And yes, the Axis can try to align Argentina here, but they only get to try it once, and they only get it on a roll of 1 or 2. So you ought to be trying to align Brazil and some of these other countries that you can align per the rules at some point just to counter that. Because if there's no Axis or Comintern units in the entire Western Hemisphere, which is right there, all of South America, Central America, North America, and I think that probably includes all of these over here too, which would mean no Japanese invasion. So Alaska might be important there. That should be easy to get. So that's 2 points that you should be able to get. Argentina is the Axis's best way to stop you from getting that point. So those 2 should be your top priority, I think. Let's go ahead and zoom in here. Maintain the empire should also be a priority, and then the Pacific security should be a priority as well. These contain fascism and contain communism are just too general and too difficult to be, too easy to be gamed at the end of the game. But making sure that you have more capital ships than Japan and making sure you possess all of your territories as of 1936, those are going to be achievable as well. And so 4 points, I think, is probably about the best that the U.S. can hope for. But I think it's a very achievable objective for them. Now, let's talk about the KMT. Here's theirs. They also have some really difficult ones, to be honest with you. First one's called Expel Foreign Influence. 1 victory point available. Score 1 victory objective if at the end of the game there are no foreign enemy troops in mainland China, excluding Hainan Island. Note that CCP are not foreign units. Well, guess what? Japan has to completely collapse and crater for you to get that. That's going to be super, super hard. No foreign troops in China. By the way, I think that would include, they're enemy troops. So, that's going to be really hard. Reclaim China. Score 1 victory if at the end of the game China has possession of any 2 of the following: Johor, Western Manchuria, Eastern Manchuria, Northern Manchuria, and Formosa. I mean, that's mostly the stuff in northern China that Japan has already taken, and Formosa, which is right here, and a lot of these territories up here that Japan already has. That's going to be super tough. I mean, honestly, you're gonna feel good if China doesn't get completely wiped out in this game. So reclaiming it, that's a whole nother story. And last, another very difficult one is defeat the communists. Score 1 if at the end of the game there's no CCP units left in China. That sounds easy, and it's so tempting, right, to think about this. And I've thought about this a lot from a strategy standpoint. You look at this. The CCP, the Chinese Communists, start with 1 territory, and they get a militia and 2 mountain infantry. But you know what? KMT, they start with all infantry in a torpedo boat destroyer, which doesn't matter in this case. And guess what? If Chinese infantry attack, and on a roll, I think of 10, 11, and 12, or 11 and 12, they run away. So it sounds easy, but they got 2 mountain infantry sitting here in a mountain with a militia. And I guess you could try it with these 3 infantry and these 3 infantry. They're going to attack at 1, and these mountain infantry are going to defend at 5. So, and if the CCP save their $2 on their first turn, they can plop down another mountain infantry on turn 2 before you even get to go. So it sounds easy to eliminate the CCP, but going to be a super tall order. I'm sorry, it sounds easy for the KMT to eliminate the CCP, but I think it's a super tall order. So, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if in most games that KMT get at most 1 point for defeating the communists, and if that happens, it's probably because the Japanese defeat them. And I think the U.S. probably get a max of 4 points. So those are my strategy thoughts for the U.S. and the KMT. Hope you enjoyed these. Admiral Seabass signing off.